I'm Tim Ventura from American Anti-Gravity, and today we're joined by Dr. Ruggero Santilli to discuss alternative particle models in physics and some practical applications to meet the challenge of America's energy needs in the 21st century. Let's briefly start with the core of your research, which is built around a new structural model of hadrons, nuclei, and molecules. In a nutshell, can you describe for me some of the core ideas that go along with this model, and perhaps what makes it unique compared to the standard model for the structure of elementary particles?
Yes, I have to back up a little bit, however, because science, quantitative science, requires a mathematical treatment, the adequate mathematical treatment that produce numbers. Those numbers have to be verified with experiments. The scientific scene regarding new clean energy, so much needed by American mankind, is the following: that all possible energies that could have been predicted and quantitatively treated by quantum mechanics and special relativity were fully identified by the middle of the past century. There has been essentially no truly fundamentally new form of energy. So in view of this, and clearly the all existing industrially available form of energy are clearly insufficient from an environmental viewpoint, from a national viewpoint, and many other respects. This situation was known already by the middle of the past century. As a result of this, a critical process of examination of the limits of validity of conventional theories was initiated in the second part of the past century. Namely, quantum mechanics and special relativity have what is called an unquestionable arena or conditions of exact validity. Namely, those are the conditions of the original conception. For instance, the structure of the hydrogen atom. To have any doubt that quantum mechanics has any limitation for the hydrogen atom will be non-scientific, is now part of history. So there are conditions, and same for special relativity, the validity of special relativity. And here is the key point. Under the condition originally conceived by Einstein and clearly written down in his magnificent paper, namely point particles moving in empty space, under those conditions, those theories are unquestionably valid. But they were talking about new energies, there are many different types. So the question originates as to whether theories that have been so successful, now part of history, in those problems, structure of the hydrogen atom, point particle, and electromagnetic moving in vacuum, etc., will also be exactly valid for the need of mankind. Exactly valid. The question that they are approximately valid is also beyond scientific doubt. But we need exact theory to produce industrially valuable results. The answer to this question has been is known but not admitted for political reasons. Namely, this theory, they have unquestionable limitations. We're talking about quantum mechanics and special relativity. There are many of them are known in the technical literature, but never presented in a PhD grad.
It sounds like it started out. I mean, and maybe I'm making an incorrect assumption here, but we live in a society, both Europe, the United States, and some of the emerging countries also, that like to fund scientific research because they like the benefits. And in order to do that, in order to justify that, they need to have a model. And so it sounds like what you're saying is the model has known flaws and has known gaps, but in order to fund these projects and get any benefit at all, they're willing to overlook that. And the challenge over time, perhaps, is that people forget that these gaps even exist. Does that sound right?
Well, yes, to a certain extent. But my point is that before passing to the answer of your question, what type of models we need for new energy, we have to talk about the applicable laws, the physical laws, the theories that are used. In other words, when you go to a mechanic, he has to use a wrench to fix your car. For me, as a physicist, to predict a new energy, I need a theory. That's my tool. So what I'm indicating is that the primary reason why so far in my personal opinion, so far no clearly new energy, environmentally acceptable new energy has been discovered and brought to the industrial level is because of insufficiency of quantum mechanics and special relativity. Let me give you one example that everybody can see. There are countless. First let's go back to the atomic structure. The Einstein, who was Einstein, and Schrödinger, the Pauli, the founders of quantum mechanics, they were real physicists. They knew that the structure of the atom is technically called reversible in time. Namely, if you invert, if you invert the direction of the rotation, if you invert the time, go backward in time, the electron, rather than turning right, let's say, will turn left, but it's still fully causal. So as a result, the reason why this theory became so important in history is precisely because their structure is reversible in time. So Einstein equation, you change the direction of time, nothing happens. It's fully causal. It's the same for quantum mechanics. It had to be conceived for that. If the quantum mechanics didn't have this feature, well, they failed. Now, fine. That's the past history. Well, now let's talk about energy. Question: are energy processes reversible in time? Absolutely not. When you burn a piece of log in a fireplace, if you reverse the time, the smoke will recondense itself into a piece of log.
Yeah, you're talking about the normal transition to higher levels of entropy, right?
Yeah, but you have a process, a piece of log that burns in our time. Then you reverse the time, and the smoke goes back into reconstructs the piece of log. That's the time reversal image. The time when the time goes backward. So the process, in other words, those processes are clearly irreversible in time. All energy processes are irreversible in time. Namely, the time reversal image violates the principle of causality because the smoke recreates, like the egg that enters into the chicken. The chicken that makes an egg, and then you reverse the time. The egg goes back into the chicken. This violates this is very well known by technicians. But the point is this: that now what has been done in the last 30 or 40 years, that those new energy processes have been studied with theory that are not cannot be exactly valid. In other words, since the quantum mechanics and special relativity are reversible in time, absolutely they cannot be possibly exact for the description of processes that are irreversible, such as production of energy. They can give some approximation, yes, but the point, however, anybody they are claimed, if the special relativity is claimed to be exactly valid for an energy releasing process that is irreversible, this is scientific corruption. My God. We can say about approximate validity, physical value, anything you want, but the moment they're used, is the final theory for the universe, then instantly there are ethical issues that are raised. So to go back to your question, this was known 3 or 4 decades ago, what I'm telling you, not spoken because of political reasons. But so in view of this, there has been a worldwide effort for new energy. First, to build the new theory, broader theory in the historical chain of evolution. Namely, physics is a chain. You do every new theory has to admit the old one in first approximation, because you don't destroy the past, you build over the past. So this has been completed years ago. New theories have been developed. There is a mechanic called hadronic mechanics, which is broader than quantum mechanics, admits quantum mechanics in first approximation. Quantum mechanics is a particular case of hadronic mechanics, but hadronic mechanics is irreversible in time, in the same way that Schrödinger and Pauli considered quantum mechanics to be reversible because they had to describe a reversible process, such as atomic structure. This was built irreversible because we had to describe now, once you have a basically new theory, then you end up with completely different new models, new structural models of hadrons, and you predict basically new energy that are unthinkable, not even conceivable with what are now they called old theory of the past century.
Okay. Now, with the new structure for hadrons, I'd like to focus in for the audience a little bit. Hadron would include then electrons, right? And which other?
No, hadrons are the strongly interacting part because they are protons, neutrons, and a bunch of others, but the others are unstable. But the only stable hadrons are protons, massive protons, and neutrons.
Okay.
Nuclear constituents, essentially.
Well, I'd like to focus in on the neutron a bit because among your many achievements, it seems that you validated Rutherford's 20-zero hypothesis of the neutron as being a form of compressed hydrogen atom. And I'd like to set this up for the audience a little bit. From what I've read of your work, this goes back to something I heard decades ago, which was that a neutron had an equivalent weight to a proton plus an electron plus the associated binding energy that keeps them together. And of course, a paired proton electron are a hydrogen atom. But I'm wondering if you could describe this a little bit for us.
Yes, it's an excellent question, and I appreciate you asking because it is one of the most central issues of our environmental problems. You see, the best hope that we have in resolving our environmental problems is to find new nuclear synthesis, and in particular with light nuclei, not with heavy nuclei, because heavy nuclei produce all sorts of radiations, while light nuclei do not, or at least in certain conditions do not. But the key point is the following. So you see all those efforts that you can see in nuclear synthesis, control the nuclear fusion. The government has invested I think $100 billion in attempting the hot fusion, etc., etc. But the viewpoint that our group is adopting is the following. This is all nice. Every effort in science is commendable, and I support it because the process is trial and error. But the first synthesis in the universe is not the nuclear synthesis, it's the synthesis of the neutron. Star initiated their formation being pure hydrogen. And the first thing that they do, they synthesize the neutron. So until we achieve the laboratory synthesis of the neutron and we discover what is beyond that, we may risk to do mambo jumbo, and that's why we spend in my humble opinion, we spend $100 billion in attempting and failing to achieve the controlled fusion, because we don't even know how the neutron synthesis is done. How can we dream of synthesize, much bigger?
Well,
and that's where
this is really exciting. I think this is a really exciting point because you've really opened the door to an entirely new type or category or whatever you might call it of subatomic fusion, right? And this is the first time that I've ever heard of this. It's not fusion in terms of creating atoms so much as it is fusion in terms of creating particles, which is
that is correct, because the biggest source of energy, the cleanest source of energy available to mankind is not of nuclear or atomic level or molecular. It is at the hadronic level, at the level of particles. You see, we have developed all sorts of energy at the atomic level, at the molecular level. That was done, during at the birth of civilization by discovery of the fire. That is an energy at the molecular level. Then we came the atomic energy, with such as the cathodic rays and the electrons and all. And then came the Enrico Fermi with the nuclear energy, and of course the atomic bomb, and etc., etc. But the next objective is the smallest and the best of the cleanest of them all is that hadronic level. Indeed, the neutron is the biggest reservoir of clean energy. I should say one of the biggest reservoir of clean energy available to mankind, because it is naturally unstable when isolated and decays spontaneously by spitting a very energetic electron that can be trapped very easily with a thin metal shield, plus a neutrino, assuming that it exists, and it is innocuous and not harmful anyhow.
Well, I'm jumping ahead in my list of questions, but I think that, again, you're raising an amazing point in terms of, I'm not sure if most people would realize this, but the neutron is an unstable particle, and it will spontaneously decay. In fact, it has a half-life, if I remember right, of around 10.3 minutes.
That is correct, indeed. Well, 15 minutes approximately, but you are correct. In certain condition, you can reach. That's correct.
Yeah, so the energy density that you're talking about. I mean, we look at fossil fuels, and a lot of renewable energy people are pushing solar and wind, which have a lower energy density than fossil fuels do, and which obviously makes it more difficult to compete rather than less. And then the alternative that big science has been pushing is nuclear fusion, which has a higher energy density. And you're pushing this beyond that. You're saying, look, we have a naturally unstable particle, and we can get them all over the place, right? It doesn't take super rare isotopes to achieve. And that is the neutron itself, which has an even higher energy density than fusion does, right?
That is very true, indeed. But now we enter into the real problems of new energy, namely the organized interest in established theory. That is unfortunately the sad part of academia. And I have reached the top of academia. I have reached the position as a of being a scientist at Harvard University on the DOE contract, and actually as a physicist I was a member of the Department of Mathematics at Harvard, which is one of the biggest honor I have ever received. So I reached the top of academia, and I left the condition to continue my research because academia often is incompatible with truly basic novel advancement in particularly nowadays, in which we have enormous amount of money invested in related to existing theory. But let's go back to the neutron. You see, the neutron is a fundamental problem, not the only one, but a fundamental problem for society. My view is the laboratory synthesis of the neutron. You see, if we discover, if we are able to synthesize the neutron in laboratory as it occurs in a star, then we will be able to stimulate its decay. By stimulating its decay, we release an enormous amount of clean energy. So, but you cannot just do the stimulated decay. You have to do also the synthesis. So the synthesis of the neutron and its stimulated decay are fundamental open problems in society. Now, it is at this point where the problems of contemporary academia and science and society emerge in all their glory. Why? Because the quantum mechanics has been claimed by organized interests, and my former colleagues at Harvard, also MIT. I've been at MIT, and then my colleagues at Princeton, Berkeley, and of course Oxford in England, and of course the University of Rome in Italy, etc. They have claimed for personal interest and academic interest that quantum mechanics works beautifully everywhere, not only for the hydrogen atom, but for everything. They have achieved this objective in a rather equivocal way by adding free parameters. In other words, they elaborate a certain theory, scattering or something. The numbers, predicted numbers, don't fit the experimental data. They throw in parameters. And say, and then claim that the theory is exact. That's where there is the threshold of between science and ethics is passed and becomes unethical, because by throwing a free parameter of unknown knowledge, you cannot claim that it's exact. You can claim it, certainly you have a good approximation.
Sure, no,
valuable physical. No, all this is going on for 30 years in many, many different processes. Now, Bose-Einstein correlation, Wacom mentioned, where they need four unknown parameters to fit things. Okay, but when you go to the synthesis of the neutron, here is the axe. There is no possibility whatsoever, by even including all parameters that you want, that with quantum mechanics provides any description whatsoever of the synthesis of the neutron inside a star as it occurs in reality from a proton and an electron. There is no possibility, for many, many reasons. This now becomes technical, but one I should mention, at least one. You see, one of the fundamental laws of quantum mechanics is that binding energy are negative. This means that you have two objects, you put them together, you bound them together, the mass of the resulting object is slightly smaller than the mass of the sum of the original masses. This is called mass defect, and this is at the origin of the atomic bomb. So if you look at all quantum mechanical bound states, which are nuclear bound state, atomic bound state, molecular bound state, all possible binding energy are negative. As a matter of fact, with the positive binding energy, the quantum mechanical equation, they literally blow Schrödinger equation and makes no solution. Now let's go to the neutron. Now here is the mystery. The mass of the neutron is much bigger than the sum of the mass of the proton and the electron. Indeed, the mass of the neutron is 0.78 million electronvolts heavier than the sum of the proton and under those conditions, you have the total collapse of quantum mechanics. You cannot even say that it's approximately valid. It's out. It's gone forever. It was not built for that. It was built for the atomic structure, namely the bound state of a proton and an electron at large mutual distances, most proportional to the planetary system. Quantum mechanics was not built for the description of an electron inside the proton. Any claim that a theory that is exactly valid for a proton and electron at a very large distance must also be exactly valid when the electron penetrates inside the proton. That is sheer scientific corruption. We can discuss what is the broader theory. This is debatable, and we can this is to be settled by a scientific process. But to deny the need for a new theory is vulgar scientific corruption because it's so evident. You want to stop the scientific process. Humanity's knowledge of humanity is stopped with quantum mechanics. My God, scientific knowledge just at the beginning. We have a little more than a century of knowledge. We have millions of years, hopefully, of evolution. So we go back to this point. So unless you have a theory that can describe the synthesis, you're like moving in a blind person moving in a labyrinth. You never get out. And that's why this hadronic mechanics was constructed precisely for a quantitative representation of the synthesis of the neutron from a proton and electron, and has indeed achieved an exact numerical exact representation of all features of the proton as a bound state of a proton and an electron.
Okay.
Now, what I'm stating, however, is anathema. This statement that the neutron is a bound state of a proton and electron, my colleagues at Harvard, Berkeley, Fermilab, my God, they rejected in an extremely violent way.
I'd always thought that neutrons, I'd always thought the standard model viewed them that way, though. But it doesn't.
No, the standard model says that the neutron is a bound state of quarks.
Oh,
not of proton and electrons. They strongly deny that it's made of a proton and electron.
So Rutherford's model has been out for years. Well, Richard Feynman had complained about quarks and the other subatomic particles. Feynman complained about having 400 different discrete subatomic particles and said, I sincerely hope that we're wrong. I'm paraphrasing, but that was, to paraphrase, that was what he'd said. Because it's too complicated and there's none of the elegance that Einstein saw it.
You are absolutely right. Feynman was one of the criticism, and Murray Gell-Mann, who I met him a number of times when I was at Harvard, MIT, himself, when he was asked, do the quarks exist as physical particles, he said he was very reluctant to answer. He said we need exercise and scientific caution. But let me tell you how absurd the academia is. We're talking about absurdity, that a high school student can see this, but a professor at Harvard, MIT, or Berkeley, oh no, that's a different situation. Let's look at the synthesis of the neutron according to the standard model. Physical evidence, clear physical evidence. The neutron originates from in the core of a star from a proton and an electron. This is uncontrovertible. I mean, we'll lose face if any physicist denies this evidence. Fine. So the standard model believes that after the synthesis, the proton and the electron disappear to be replaced by quarks. My God! But the proton and the electrons are the only stable, massive, stable particles existing in the universe. How can they possibly disappear to be replaced by hypothetical and undetectable quarks?
Well,
but that's only the beginning. I'm sorry, I apologize. Let me finish. But then the neutron is naturally unstable, and when it decays, what it does, it reproduces a proton and electron. So, we have a multiple of absolutely, I mean, this is irrational thinking. The irrational thinking in the following sense that for the synthesis, proton and electron, they disappear and are replaced by quarks. And then after 15 minutes, the quarks disappear and the proton and electrons they reappear. My God! But there is a limit on what mumbo jumbo the science, and it's so fully supported by billions of dollars from our government. The position of Murray-Gell-Mann is my position. Quarks are purely mathematical, in rigorous scientific terms. Quarks are purely mathematical objects because they are mathematical representation, the so-called fundamental representation, of a purely mathematical group, symmetry group, which is the SU3 group, which cannot be defined in our, not even defined in our space-time, but is defined in the so-called purely mathematical unitary internal space. So Murray-Gell-Mann position was that quarks are purely mathematical objects that are indeed necessary to elaborate the standard model. Yes, this is obvious. But there is no need of imposing that they are physical particles, and this is the central problem of contemporary society, because organized academia insists on the existence of quarks as physical particles, and this implies the suppression by academic power, of fundamentally new forms of energy available for the damage to mankind is enormous.
Well, what happens to the electron once it fuses with the proton? Does it disappear, or is it inside of the proton?
It remains, according to hadronic mechanics, it remains fully identified. It experiences what are called mutations. In other words, think about an electron in empty space, has certain features. Spins, mass, etc., etc. When the same electron is immersed in the hyperdense medium inside the proton, it cannot be identical, it's deformed. Technically it's called mutated and obeys broader physical laws. But let me go back to the real issue, because the issue on quarks, because the American people are not aware that we are living in perhaps one of the biggest scientific obscurantism in the history of mankind, funded by our government, by you and me and my neighbors. Let me tell you another point to understand because we're talking about scientific corruption here. All physicists of a certain level know what I'm about to tell you, because if they didn't read in the technical paper, I told them. Okay, you see, it is known beyond any doubt that quarks cannot experience any gravity at all. In other words, and this is due to Einstein. Einstein was adamant in saying that gravitation can only be defined in our space-time. When you exit from the space-time, you exit from inertia, mass, and everything else. So, but quarks cannot be defined in our space-time, can only be defined in this unitary space of the SU3 space. And there is a theorem, or Rafferty theorem, that prohibits any connection between. So, since the quarks cannot be defined in our space-time, they cannot have gravity. This is known and published in referee journal all over the world, but it is not spoken. So when my former colleagues at Harvard, MIT, and Berkeley, they claim that the quarks are physical particles, their body should levitate like Satan, or like a ghost, because no gravity, because they claim that their nuclei are made of quarks, but quarks have no gravity. How can they possibly? And there are so many of those inconsistencies that you won't believe it.
Yeah. Well, the evidence that you have for this is nothing less than the synthesis of neutrons in the lab by running a high-energy electrical arc through pure hydrogen gas. And I guess this generates a stream of neutrons as the output. I'm wondering if you could describe for us the process that you're using to generate them.
Yes, the problem on technical ground is extremely complex, and is made of stages. Because again, the history of science has established that you never destroy past theory of clear validity. You can only improve the past theory in new conditions, but always in such a way that admitting all theories as a particular case. So during the synthesis of the neutron, when you try to synthesize, you start from a hydrogen atom, and from the hydrogen atom you have to reach the neutron. Okay. Now there is an intermediary step. In other words, you keep squeezing, compressing, as Rutherford. You beautifully remember Rutherford word, and I'm very grateful to you for this, because he's the originator of all this. And so Rutherford was talking about the compression of a hydrogen atom in the core of a star. It is true. The hydrogen atoms first are loose, but then they multiply by the jillions and jillions, and gravity increases the density. With the increase of the density, they are squeezed, compressed. And you reach a certain limit in which the electron is no longer at a distance from the proton, but touches the proton and then finally penetrates inside the proton. The final result being the neutron. Now, but my point is this: that in this process, I mentioned before that the synthesis of the neutron, the final value, the final number of the neutron as a bound state of a proton or electron, cannot be described by quantum mechanics. But this doesn't mean that quantum mechanics is completely out of the process. No, it will not be scientific. So during this what we call Rutherford compression, quantum mechanics keeps to be remaining. I'm referring to the point where you decrease the distance. Quantum mechanics keeps working beautifully. The only point is that you reach a value. Let me disconnect my phone. I'm sorry. You reach a value of so you decrease the radius, but you decrease the radius, but the quantum mechanics remain valid. You keep decreasing. You reach a point, at which then quantum mechanics is no longer valid, and then you pass to this broader theory, which is hadronic mechanics. So now this theoretical scenario appears to be reproduced in laboratory beautifully, because when you bound together a short distance, a proton and an electron, according to quantum mechanics, you cannot get a neutron, because the sum of the proton and the electron spin is 0. The neutron has spin 1/2, and so clearly you may have a small particle. But that small particle not necessarily is the neutron, because you still miss the spin 1/2. And so to answer your question, we have completed in laboratory, and there is a paper now available, and be happy to send it to any interested person anyhow. We have completed the first step, namely we have synthesized in laboratory what we call the pseudoneutron. Namely, is a particle that, here is the key point, obeys quantum mechanics. So as spin 0, not spin 1. And now we are in the process of synthesizing, making the next step, which is starting from the pseudoneutron to go to the neutron, which means having all the features, including the spin.
Okay. Now, as you're generating these, because they're in hydrogen gas, do you end up with a fair amount of deuterium as product?
Not to our knowledge, and we did not. It's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. We did not look for deuterium because the objectives were different. But definitely it's a beautiful question. Love to answer this question.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I know it's kind of it's kind of tangential, but the reason I'd asked was I thought this might also be a way of making fuel for nuclear fusion.
That is also true. This is indeed, that has been seen also by various physicists. They've seen this possibility. What we know at this time, not because Ruggero says so, but because of experimental evidence, which seems to be very, very clear, is that those we call them pseudoneutrons. Those are particles which are essentially the size of the neutron, a little bit bigger, but essentially the size of a neutron. They are neutral, completely neutral. They spin 0, and as a result, they are very easily. They pass through huge walls of steel and everything. We detected them, after enormous barriers, and they are very easily absorbed by nuclei. And then it appears that once they are absorbed by nuclei, then they are turned by nuclei into neutrons.
Ah.
For instance, we have established that if you take the zirconia or silver absorb those pseudoneutrons, and then they spit an electron, and which means they spit the spin 1/2. So this means that the residual particle acquires spin 1/2. So the residual particle, they don't spit a pseudoneutron, they spit an electron, which means the pseudoneutron has been turned into a neutron. Namely, the nucleus itself has made the last step of synthesis of the neutron. That's for big and heavy nuclei. Back to your question, the beautiful question of the deuterium, it will have only one proton. So we do not know. I'm sure that we expect, we're not sure, I should say, we expect that the proton and the pseudoneutron will bound each other, yes, because they bound with everything we know, so it's logical to expect. But the fact that this pair of proton and pseudoneutron can turn into the deuterium, we do not know, because we don't know if there is enough energy to create a neutron spin.
Well, now these neutrons are unique, right? In that they're low speed neutrons. I mean,
very slow speed.
Yeah, when you see when you see bare neutrons coming out of a particle accelerator or being produced in atomic events, they're always moving at super high speeds, and that brings up a lot of the dangers that we think of as neutron radiation. But I understand that your process is unique in that some of these have so little kinetic energy that I hear that smacking the generator will force them to literally just drift out of the electrically polarized gas to set the detector off.
Indeed, it's very true. It's funny, but I say funny, but I shouldn't say so. But it is true, because sometimes we have to hammer, and hack the cluster, the chamber, because we wait for a few hours and nothing happens, nothing comes out. I said, are they there or not? So we start hammering, and they come out. That is the case. You touch. Your question is also very important. That you see this new physics, this very high energy. Physics has gone to higher and higher energy, has completely ignored very low energies. There are rumors that this has been done for political reasons, because the higher and higher energy that you go, you can cover up and somewhat adjust and preserve old theory. The moment you go toward the low energy, you are forced to abandon all decrepit theories in favor of new ones. So it's been done by political calculations and premeditated intent. But the future of humanity depends on very low energy, not only in this case, but in many other instances.
Well, and I understand that this, that the research you're doing isn't without precedent. I mean, first there's Rutherford, and then in the late 1960s, there was an Italian physicist, Don Carlo Borghi, who seemed to show the same experimental results, right?
It's very nice of you to mention it. You are very well educated. Thank you. Grazie, I should say in Italian. Don Borghi, Carlo Borghi, was an Italian priest physicist. He believed in Rutherford, and he spent his life proving Rutherford to be right. He had a magnificent religious life. As a priest, is known, actually, a friend of mine from the Vatican, Father Carco, is an official writer of the Vatican, is writing a little bit about the life of Don Carlo Borghi. But as a physicist, he had an horrendously miserable life. He was claimed to be a fraud, scientific fraud by all Italian physicists, and he was forced to leave Italy. Finally, went to Brazil, and he did this experiment that you in the late 60s, this experiment in Brazil. After you see the organized, I cannot use another name, organized scientific corruption is so widespread that even when facing experimental results that are opposing their interest, they dismiss them as mumbo jumbo. This is horrendous scientific corruption, because an experiment on serious scientific grounds can only be dismissed with another experiment, with a counter experiment, but not with the mumbo jumbo, la la la. I am the professor on the University of Milan, and I claim Don Carlo Borghi is a fraud. This is horrendous scientific corruption, and none of them has really repeated. I've been the first to at least approach to repeat seriously Don Borg experiments to prove that whether it was right or wrong, and it turned out to be correct.
Sure. So you're doing a replication plus extending his original research, which really, satisfies the burden of at least initial scientific evidence.
Yes, it is my opinion that the results claimed by Don Carlo Borghi and his associate in Brazil are correct. They claim to have a klystron in which they had a discharge. They have a hydrogen gas, and inside this hydrogen, this was traversed by an electric discharge. Plus there was a microwave, and they kept this klystron. It's a chamber essentially. It's a pressure chamber, low pressure. They kept this running for weeks and weeks. What they did, they put around this cylindrical chamber. I think was about 6 inches or so by 11 inches, 12 inches or so. It's a small chamber. They put around this chamber all sorts of fissionable material, namely material that absorb neutrons, namely material that show nuclear transmutations. They put a variety of material around, and they left this material around the chamber for weeks, and then they studied this material, and they detected in a variety of material incontrovertible nuclear transmutation that could only be interpreted on serious scientific ground, beyond the mumbo jumbo la of the top physicists here and there, could only be interpreted as originating from a flux of neutrons that be initiated inside the chamber, because there was no neutron source nearby, and in any case did not have the flux needed to represent that thing. This claim has been confirmed in full in our laboratory, and now what happened, unfortunately for mankind, the reason why, which is unspoken reason why Don Borghi had such an horrendous life as a physicist, is again organized interest in quantum mechanics and Einstein special relativity, because the synthesis, as I indicated before, the synthesis of the neutron, while quantum mechanics and Einstein special relativity have been manipulated by adding parameters and concocted and all sorts of modifications, have been manipulated and claimed to be exact for everything. When you reach the synthesis of the neutron, they are inapplicable. You cannot say that they are violated, because Einstein did not conceive his special relativity for the synthesis of the neutron. It would be unethical to say, but they are inapplicable. And so the moment they admit that Don Borghi is correct, for people who really know what they're talking about, real experts, this implies the axe say this is the end. You cannot apply Einstein relativity here. You have to go beyond. You have to come up something which is broader than Einstein. And academia is not ready for that step at this moment.
Well, in terms of measuring neutrons, what kind of a detector are you using for it?
Well, we use a variety of different detectors, because we have to check and recheck and verify. They are in the website of our. Can be found all the measurements and the pictures of the detector. They are. If you interested listener can look at www.neutron. I think it was the neutron synthesis.org. Is one of our website.
Okay, and then the other is neutronstructure.org, and I would definitely
neutronstructure.org. And then at the very, very top there is a link to the picture of the scans and the picture of the chamber that we use, the klystron and so on. There's all the details.
Oh, okay. So all of your detector equipment for people looking to learn a little bit more about how you're measuring, how you're validating results and stuff can find it there.
Yes, it was not easy because the particle that in this first phase, remember we have two phases. The first phase is to create what this entity completely new, which we tentatively call pseudoneutron, because it's as small as a neutron, it's neutral as a neutron, and the same size, but it hasn't got the spin 1/2. And then we have the second step in which we synthesize the neutron truly. Now, this first particle is the detectors that are available are neutron detectors. They are not detectors for pseudoneutron. So that's why we have to use a variety of detectors to make sure that the behavior of one was confirmed by the other, since those detectors were not designed for this new particle, but were designed for a different particle, the one with spin 1/2.
Now, this sounds like the pseudoneutron would also radically change our conceptions of quantum mechanics, because if I remember correctly, we typically look at particles like the neutron or proton and say, okay, this is a spin whatever particle, and that's what that particle always is. But you're suggesting that when this particle is newly formed, it may not have that spin, but picks it up apparently maybe as a property of what it would prefer to do, I guess. The lowest energy state would be spin 1/2, maybe.
Well, the final energy state, but there are intermediate states. There is the intermediate state of 0, and then you go into spin 1/2.
Okay.
But you are correct in stating that there is a completely new physics. Indeed, there is a completely new nuclear physics, because when a nucleus absorbs a pseudoneutron, it's not an isotope as you can see listed at Los Alamos or at Oxford or in Dubna in Russia. No, it has new features. It's unstable, highly unstable, so that's why it was not detected. But we call them pseudonuclei, pseudo isotope. This is new nuclear physics. And incidentally, that's the reason why we have money, and we are fully funded, certainly not from academia, certainly not from our beloved National Science Foundation, that of course with everybody there has a veneration for Einstein's special relativity, so don't even dream of applying there for money. My God, no. We are funded by the industry, because in the industry level there is specific needs, the politics on theory that do not exist. So we are fully funded. Because and the reason is that there is indeed a serious possibility that of producing basically new clean energies by using those pseudo states, and of course by using those processes. And as far as I am concerned, I am a pacifist, and the one point that pleases me, that according to my calculation, those processes cannot be explosive. There is no possibility that those pseudoneutrons can cause a bomb. No, not to my knowledge at this moment. And but they release, because the amount of energy that they release is from an explosion bomb viewpoint is too small. And also and also they are clean, so I don't foresee any military any new nuclear bomb. Let me put it this way with this field. No, there is not that I know, at least. And at the same time, the radiations, the secondary radiation, do exist, but they're very weak. They're made of electrons. They can be trapped with thin metal shield. And then the neutrino, assuming that it exists, is innocuous. But you don't have neutron. We have detected no neutron radiations after the absorption of the pseudoneutron. But we have detected very isoenergetic nuclear reaction that should be. There is a realistic possibility that could be a source of new clean energy. Or let me put it this way: the possibilities are sufficient to motivate very smart American, with a capital A, American businessmen to invest money to see whether it's correct or wrong.
I wonder if your work might shed some light on an interesting result that Proton 21 Labs had. They're a lab in the Ukraine, and I believe they were formerly financed by the Soviet government, at least a long time ago. I believe Dr. Adamenko runs it, and now they've been private for obviously several years. And they had an interesting anomaly happen a few years ago, where they were bombarding a sample with the beam from, I believe it was a proton beam, an ion beam, and they ended up with a black spot, and they were measuring the results of basically, it was an electrical arc process where they were trying to do transmutations, but this black spot basically absorbed this beam for a period of several seconds, and then gave off an intense burst of gamma. And they had speculated that possibly, because it emitted nothing, it just kept absorbing, 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 and then just finally just let off this pulse. They speculated that maybe this was some kind of pure neutronium that they generated on the surface of their sample using their arc discharge process.
Well, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with the process. I will study as soon as I have the time. Your description is very accurate. It sounds plausible to me. I had a number of similar reports of creating neutron by using ion beams thrown against matter, and atoms missing one electron and so on. So or let me put in. I had also the reports of creation of neutrons by using an electron beam thrown against a given substance, and there are a number of reports. Unfortunately, all those reports have not been studied systematically so far because of the politics on the applicable theory. This is because, again, quantum mechanics, special relativity does not predict that the neutron can be synthesized from proton and electron against the strongest possible evidence. Just look at any star. Initiate a life being solely form of hydrogen.
Well,
so the neutron must originate from proton and electron.
And it's like you said about detecting pseudoneutrons. In their case, they have very good, top-notch equipment in their lab. But in a lot of these cases, when you're encountering something fundamentally new or just outside of what you're prepared for, the equipment doesn't cut it. And in their case, the problem they had was they had a substance, again, this black spot, that was literally just non-reactive, even in terms of re-emitting photons, which is unheard of, right? Bombarding it with light and getting nothing back. I mean, and that was what led them to believe that it was neutronium, because they thought the only thing that you could really bombard like this that wouldn't, re-emit that would be a neutron, because there's literally no electron there to emit a photon. So that
it is very, very true what you state, indeed. The only possibility for not to be able to emit light is that the electron has been captured in a hyperdense medium. Yes, it's exactly I think it's very, very same thing. And in other words, what we call the pseudonucleus the pseudonucleus is essentially what you indicate, namely that we have a nucleus in which we have an atom. Think about the helium, and then oxygen, to be to look at the far future. Then think about those atoms. The point is this: if Rutherford is correct in saying that the hydrogen atom can be compressed into a neutral state, then we must assume that with due development of the technology in the far future, we can do the same for the helium, for the oxygen. In this case, we create what we call a pseudonucleus, a nucleus that is completely neutral and has absorbed all the electrons from the outside. Of course, it is unstable. We expect it to be highly unstable, but they have a sufficient life to produce significant energetic reactions, namely produce energy that hopefully can be used by society.
Well, in terms of creating neutrons, has anyone yet identified, or has your research identified, what the binding force is inside of the atom that seems to stabilize a neutron? Because I think that came up with Proton 21's work as well. Was this question of, if it is neutronium, why isn't it decaying? What's going on here? And it would be interesting to see if there might be some way to stabilize these neutrons to prevent them from decaying.
Well, now we enter into the unknown in the field in which it's not accepted by academia. So to make a distinction, for honesty, I have to say what the so-called establishment believes and what those new studies indicate. According to the establishment, nuclei are made of protons and neutrons. Okay. And however, despite 100 years of nuclear physics, the insufficiencies and the open problems left by quantum mechanics for this assumption are enormous, shameful. We have reached, for instance, think about the deuteron. Quantum mechanics is unable to explain why the neutron coupled with the proton is stable. When it is alone, it's unstable. When it couples with the proton in the deuteron, becomes unstable. Ask the Nobel Prize physicists at MIT, Berkeley, and they will drop their mouth. But it's only the beginning. Quantum mechanics predicts that the two particles with spin 1/2 must have the lowest energy level as with spin 0, singlet state. It's the fundamental axiom or law of quantum mechanics. So according to quantum mechanics, the deuteron should have spin 0. Why? Because the proton has spin 1/2, the neutron has spin 1/2. They can only couple in singlet anti-parallel spin. The total spin should be 0. Look now, that's the theory, Harvard, MIT, Berkeley, etc. Now let's look at the physical reality. It's different than what they say in academia. Physical reality says that the deuteron has spin 1. Question, can quantum mechanics represent the spin 1 of the neutron? Don't even ask the question, forget about it. And then this thing keeps going on and on and on and on. And then this for the deuteron, the simplest possible nucleus. Imagine when we go to the zirconium. I have a volume of unsolved questions, basically unsolved by quantum mechanics. That is the state. So this essentially tells you, this is now I tell you my viewpoint. My viewpoint that this interpretation of nucleus as made a bound state of proton and neutron certainly is a good, certainly is a nice physical work. We produce nuclear power plant. They work based on that conception. So there is a clear scientific value. But the issue is, science is a continuous discovery of new horizon and new question. Is the final view? Absolutely not in my view. You see, the moment you admit that the nucleus is indeed a bound state of a proton and an electron, then the nuclei cannot be any longer conceived as being bound state of proton and neutron. No, they are bound state of protons and electrons. So the deuteron is made of 2 protons and 1 electron. If you do this, instantly you solve a problem in history, because instantly you get a 3-body, immediately you get the spin 1. Immediately, which you cannot get with a 2-body. Proton, neutrons, you don't get spin 1. But you have a 3-body, 2 protons and 1 electron, instantly you get the spin 1. Instantly you get the energy of the deuteron. Instantly you get the magnetic moment of the deuteron, etc. Numerically exact. You see, this is what is mandatory to that's why there is such an enormous fanatic opposition against the Domborg experiment, and because of you see the collapse of 100 years of research and beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. Sorry if I interrupt you, but the bottom part, what is not admitted is that physics is an approximation. And the nature is so complicated that we can all at best be in a...
Well, let me redirect a little bit and ask how your process compares to something like an atomic hydrogen torch.
I'm not familiar with the atomic hydrogen torch.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently it's very similar in terms of passing an electrical arc through hydrogen gas, and I guess it generates very high temperatures, and that was why I'd asked.
Oh, now I understand. Yes, there is a great connection. As a matter of fact, there is also a health problem, because they were talking about neutral particles and I definitely recommend. One of the reasons why we became serious in continuing the experimentation is precisely from a health problem, because there were those pseudoneutrons. They are neutrals. They propagate. They are absorbed by the body, and we have to be careful. Enrico Fermi died of cancer in his mouth because he was looking at this experiment, close by, and did not know the neutrons were emitted, and they hit his face, and he died at a relatively young age because of cancer in his mouth. And so we have to be very careful. There is a health problem that has to be addressed.
Well, speaking of health, one of the applications for this, again, it's on the website at neutronstructure.org, is a technology for nuclear waste remediation. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how this technology could help eliminate nuclear waste.
Well, this is is an important question, but it's a sad question for me, and I want to be straight. I'm a scientist. I'm not a politician. I want to tell. I worked for years of my life in what is called a field is called stimulated recycling of nuclear waste via their stimulated decays. I repeat, recycling of nuclear waste via the stimulated decay. What is the main idea? The main idea is so elementary, anybody can see it. We're talking about what nuclear waste is. What everybody knows comes out of the nuclear power process in a nuclear power plant. Those nuclei are very large. They're very. I'm talking about uranium and similar very heavy. Are some of the largest nuclei, and they are naturally unstable. Some of them they decay in one day. Some of them decay in 100,000 years. But it's natural. They reach a point, the nucleus decomposes itself. And it's this decomposition that the debris are very harmful for society, etc., etc. That's the problem of nuclear waste. The point now is the following, that since those nuclei are very large, and since they are naturally unstable, this is the key point, it's like a neutron, then there must be a mechanism to stimulate their decay. If I, Ruggero, am unable to locate that mechanism, Michael, my next physicist can be smarter than me and will find one. But there has to be a mechanism that stimulates the decay. In reality, when you look at this problem on technical grounds, we need very little to stimulate the decay. For instance, suppose you apply a very powerful electric field to a nucleus. According to any physical law, the nucleus deformed into a football-shaped entity.
Sure.
This deformation alone will trigger the decay. That alone will trigger the decay. And indeed, there are several patents by smart fellow Americans that obtained patent precisely on triggering the decay of nuclear waste by using strong electric fields and many other mechanisms and so on. So this is from on technological viewpoint. Now you go on scientific view. There is now the scientific viewpoint, and there is the political viewpoint. On scientific viewpoint, if you go back to Harvard and why MIT, that is supposed to be the leader in the field, does not study the stimulated nuclear decay, cannot study that decay. Cannot. The reason being because this stimulated decay is not predicted by Einstein's special relativity. Implies necessary deviation. For technically, you have a breakdown of the fundamental symmetry of the special relativity, which is the Poincare symmetry. The Poincare symmetry has certain predictions. One of them is that whatever the main life is, you cannot change it. But again, the special relativity was not conceived by the poor, I say poor, I apologize, the great Einstein, was considered for other things, not for stimulating decay, but has to be applied to every Einstein relativity, has to be universal, applied for everything, any possible, and then you enter into politics, and that's why. So when they see the work on the simulated decay, here you see the famous professor, Nobel Prize. So no, that's pure nonsense. That's scientific fraud. I am the Nobel Prize. I claim this nonsense, and they demolish the research in that way. Now, to complement the damage to society, there is the political aspect, namely that the moving of the radioactive waste to the Yucca Mountain is an enormous, it's a panacea for politicians. We are talking about a minimum of $500 billion that politicians can disperse and get votes.
Well, now in terms of stimulated decay, for the audience's sake, what you're describing is something I've covered this in the past, and actually we should probably, if you're up to it, doing a future interview on it would be amazing as well. But stimulated beta decay is what I've covered, but I guess alpha decay would also apply in terms of putting a high voltage electric field on nuclear waste and being able to extract energy from it by having it break down more rapidly. And it also gives us the possibility for something like, for instance, a cell phone battery that might run for 5 to 20 years. And when it's dead, it's completely inert. It would have no radioactive energy left. Does that fit with what you're describing?
Yes, it does. However, let me tell you very, very openly that the organized interest against scientific studies on the stimulated, on the recycling of nuclear waste via the stimulated decay, they're organized those organized instances in academia and politics are so powerful, they are so disruptive, and they've caused so much damage to anybody who has tried this, that I have decided a year ago to leave the field and never return again.
Well,
I don't want to enter in too many details, but I can only tell you that one of my associate lost his permanent job, and there have been that should really, the case should be under my feeling as a U.S. citizen. And I came to this country as an immigrant. I am an immigrant citizen, but I came to this country, first of all, after achieving the highest possible education in both physics, mathematics, and chemistry, PhD. But I'm also the son of an Italian medical doctor. I had no financial need to come to America. I came to America for dreams. I intend to fight for those dreams. And now my feelings is that this should be this is a typical case in which there should be a Senate investigation, and investigating why the Department of Energy, the National Science Foundation, they spend so much money, and if you look at their budget, there is not only there is no research, but there is disruption, and there will be many Americans that will go and testify of the disruption that they've suffered, because the reason being, because the moment you prove the stimulated decay of nuclear waste, you don't the $500 billion of to be used of public funds is gone. The politicians cannot be used anymore, because the nuclear power plant will recycle their own nuclear waste. Sure. And unfortunately, since in the Senate hearings, they should primarily investigate politicians. This will never happen. So I lost any hope that at least during my generation, this problem can be even addressed in an orderly way because of manipulation of science.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely agree with your concerns about the scientific establishment, and I believe that the validity of a scientific model is in the results that it predicts. And the reason I wanted to explore, some of this was to set the stage for another technology that you've developed that directly addresses the world's dependence on fossil fuels. I'm talking about magnet gas. I'd like to ask you just kind of what the brief description of it is.
Well, can we schedule another meeting, because I don't want to be too. That also raises a fundamental issue, in this case in chemistry, and unless those issues are addressed, then the audience may be misled as being something very easy. And but I'll be happy to. I will be at your disposal for a separate.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's wrap things up for the day then. I guess I should, touch on the Institute for Basic Research, which you founded back in 1983, and you did leave behind an impressive academic career to do this. And as you've mentioned, you've worked on NASA research at the University of Miami, and you've done research for the Air Force while serving as an associate professor at the University of Boston. And then you've also spent time as a visiting scholar at MIT, and you've done work at Harvard University. So you did leave all this behind, and I think that adds weight to some of your criticisms of the scientific establishment, because it sounds like it's had kind of a personal impact to in a sense, follow the truth and I guess put yourself at odds with the accepted wisdom.
That is correct. I agree. You summarize my curriculum, my activities, all true and documentable. Let me put it in this way. I've been a teacher many years, and I loved teaching. Even when I was at Harvard, I taught a post-PhD seminar course in theoretical physics, even though it was not listed. But anyhow, so I decided to dedicate my life to the environment. I reached a point in life after having reached the peak of my career at Harvard, 5 grants from the Department of Energy. I couldn't go higher than that. I realized that I was a crossroad. Either I will accept the political, it's what it boils down to, mental slavery. Let me be very, namely, your mind has to do this, it has to be compatible with the work of that Nobel Prize. you at Harvard, you Harvard man, you have to do this because otherwise the other fellow lose $100 million contract. Either you do that, or you're out, or you have to elect to go. If you want to do real research, you have to get out. I elected to. I am an independent person. I love America dearly because of the sense of freedom that is unique. I've lived in all countries around the world, including China, Russia, and brief periods, of course, after the collapse of the communism in Russia. But anyhow, I love this sense of freedom. I elected to leave academia as a necessary condition for me and our fellow associate scientists at the Institute of Physics. Here is the key point: to be free without political restriction on the pursuit of research. Namely, and it is my opinion that if I had to remain at Harvard, I will have I don't want to be vain, but I publish more books than any other colleague at Harvard, even as of today. I have more publications and more discovery. I don't want to be vain, but I believe that certainly at least I will have deserved a chair at Harvard, at least that. I don't want to say to be superior, certainly not to Nobel Prize and so on, no, but at least that. But here is the key point: everything I did, the little that I achieved, because there was very minute step on an enormous problem, the little that I achieved would not even have been started. This American fuel you mentioned, Magna Gas, forget about, would not even have been possible even to discuss it, let alone to develop it.
Well, and we'll definitely come back to that another time. Now I should ask, before I forget, in terms of energy density, which again, that's just something I can't stress enough, the neutron being more dense than fusion as a source of energy, is there a way to directly harness this as a new form, I guess, of fusion energy?
Yes, there is. Again, there is a prediction of a very clean, non-explosive energy, which is again is based on the principle of the stimulated neutron decay. We discussed it before, the neutron synthesis. But that's in preparation. Remember, all my work is toward new, clean energy. I dedicated my life to this. So that the synthesis of the neutron is to understand its structure, but always for the scope of the other half, with the important one for society, namely how do we do the stimulated decay of the neutron. If we are able to stimulate the decay of the neutron, then we release, you see, to synthesize the neutron, you need 0.78 million electron volts worth of energy. When we stimulate the decay of the neutron, we obtain that energy. That energy is released. So it's a large amount of energy released by one single neutron, and it is released in an environmentally acceptable way. Again, because you spit only one electron, which you can trap very easily with a metal shield, and you get an electric current, and you get heat, and so on. Talking about the energy of the electrons, which is 1,000,000 times the energy of the electrons hitting your TV screen. So if the beam, the cathodic beam hitting your TV, the computer screen was made of those electrons, the screen will melt instantly. So because of the enormous. So yes, and this is a direct consequence. Once the neutron, and only once, not before, only once the neutron is admitted as being a bound state, of a broader bound state of a proton and electron, not obeying the laws of quantum mechanics. That's the only point. Because once you assume that, it's over. But there has to be broader laws, because there are laws of an electron moving into the hyperdense medium inside the proton. Once you accept that conception of the proton, then the stimulated decay, there are many ways to stimulate the decay of the proton. One in which we have done some initial work is by sending a special photon, which is called a resonating photon, to the neutron. That resonating photon excites the electron and spits it out. And you cause the stimulated decay of the neutron, and you have a very large source of energy.
So it's really finding the right frequency then for the photon, and then just bombarding your neutron substance with that.
That is correct. Your question or comments are beautiful. Thank you. It's a pleasure being your.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's just. I mean, this is one of those few, rare opportunities to cover a truly new technology, and a truly new, I guess, view into science. And so, what my hope for the audience is that this gives them enough to go on that they can then follow up and visit neutronstructure.org and begin putting together some of the tools that they'll need to really understand this, and hopefully follow in your footsteps and start this new revolution in energy that we've all been waiting for. Um, well, I should also mention your publications, because this is another source for information. You published the Hadronic Journal and the Hadronic Journal Supplement in Algebras, Groups, and Geometries. And I guess in addition, back in 1999, you also founded the International Committee for Scientific Ethics and Accountability.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the publications and the committee?
Yes, I'll be happy to do so. It's also very important. You see, this is we are talking about all post-PhD level research that has been published in virtually all the most important journals throughout the world, not only in America, of course, but also in England, in France, in Russia. Some very important papers. China, the paper on the synthesis of the neutron was published in China. The number at Academia Sinica. I was a visiting scholar for a couple of weeks, because we had an international meeting there. Anyhow, so there are publications. I think the way to look at them is to look at my curriculum, which can be found. You go into google.com, and you look under Ruggero, Maria, Santilli, and my curriculum vitae appears, and there you see a list of publication books and so on. I think that will be one efficient way of Ruggero is Ruggero, and Maria is like Mary, but Italian, Maria, and then Santilli. And this is basically, but I have to alert your audience that when I was at Harvard. I was invited. It's true. I was invited by the Department of Energy to apply for grants to initiate this, what is kind of now the beginning of this new scientific current all over the world. And I had to be moved to. I was a member at that time of the Lyman Laboratory of Physics at Harvard. I had to move to the Department of Mathematics, as I mentioned before. The reason being because there cannot be really new advancement in physics and or science at large unless you have new mathematics. And you cannot have new mathematics unless you have new numbers. So in pursuing energy, I spend 90% of my time in looking at new mathematics which has been developed. And everything I indicated, namely the hadronic mechanics, the synthesis of the neutron, etc., is based on mathematics that is much broader than Hilbert space and the mathematics of quantum mechanics. In other words, it would be presumptuous to think of broadening quantum mechanics unless you first enlarge the mathematics of quantum mechanics. This was achieved years ago when, and I'm pleased to indicate, for instance, that. As now it is known all over the world, this new mathematics carries my name, Santilli, ISO, Geno, and hypermathematics. But I had the honor that in Italian Mathematics Journal, Rendiconti Circolo Matematico Palermo is a very nice historical mathematics journal. They dedicated one entire issue of that journal to this new mathematics. Also, Physical Society, also I have been critical of the establishment, but allow me to say a compensatory word. Physics, I continue to be physics despite all this criticism, obstruction, and I use at times even strong words against academia. I should add that this is a natural process in science. At times it is considered to be necessary. It's a kind of selection, a natural selection. Only the idea that survived this horrific scrutiny by colleagues, which has to be horrific because we're talking about science, only those ideas are valid. And in defense of the establishment, let me indicate that the Italian Physical Society has recently published one of my most important memoir, namely precisely what we indicated, an irreversible generalization or broadening of quantum mechanics permitted by a new mathematics called genomathematics. So they review first the genomathematics, and then they review the new mechanics, and I touch only in the final part on the applications, but I was prohibited by contractual obligations that I have with the people who are financing me. I could not disclose all the applications on new energy. I've been told that eventually I will be allowed to disclose it. I'm pushing to disclose the application on new energy soon. So you must know, so there is a natural process of correction in academia, because eventually the truth emerges always, and that's why I'm a physicist.
Absolutely.
Regarding you want to know also the International Committee on Scientific Ethics?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, the issue is the following: that it is now a widespread opinion that we are living. I want to use strong. This is my opinion. I share the opinion now shared by many scientists all over the world. We are living in the glitter of this magnificent technological advances. We send satellites or a rocket all the way to the faraway planet with incredible precision. And look at the technology advancement of the computer, etc. Despite all that technological advances, as far as the basic research is concerned, we are living in what are called the biggest scientific obscurantism in history. That is so big to dwarf, by comparison, the obscurantism organized by the Vatican. And I am a Catholic Italian, but I have to admit the truth, organized by the Vatican against Galileo Galilei. And the reason for these very strong terms are the following: that at the time of Galileo Galilei, the reason for the Vatican were pseudo-religious kind of reason that caused the obscurantism. But most importantly, the obscurantism during Galileo time had no damage whatsoever to society, none. With just a pure religious diatribe and stuff. Situation now is dramatically different. First of all, this obscurancy is motivated by money, huge sum, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars invested in research. No, not enough. This obscurantism now has a direct negative impact on society, because you see everything we said, all the opposition that I reviewed against discrediting, opposing, discrediting research on new energy that are so much needed. Look at this increasingly cataclysmic environmental decay. So the society needs this, but the organized interests, they oppose, discredit, disrupt this type of research. So that's why the obscurantism, and why there is an obscurantism, because it is imposed by academic power, and of which, unfortunately, the news media all over the world, including Italy, not only America, Italy, Germany, the news media is total subservient to academia. When the professor at the principal says something, the news media, they drop their mouth, and it's true, and anybody else is discredited, is nothing, is out. And the reason why that the news media do have indeed a kind of check on the political process, but there is absolutely, positively no check whatsoever on the scientific process, none. So since there is no check whatsoever, so what is happening in science is unbelievable, because if I tell my neighbors, they would think that I'm crazy. This is not possible in America today. Yes, it's possible because nobody checks them out, and the news media don't believe that. So this is now known by all informed people. So conclusion, the point is this now. Today, in view of the situation, it is impossible to conduct truly new research, which means beyond the pre-established theory. It is impossible to conduct new research unless jointly you consider the ethical process. Otherwise, you are just a dreamer. And that has been the birth of this International Committee of Scientific Ethics, in which I'm bound. Absolute secrecy is made by known scientists all over the world. That everybody is acting on the secrecy. They don't use their name, because otherwise they will lose their job instantly, no matter what tenure, jobs, forget about. They will instantly be thrown out of academia. So, and it's essentially it's a body of individuals all over the world. They really care about ethics and science. They are putting their academic life on the line, and they are monitoring what's going on for posterity, because what's going on has to be exactly what happened to the Galileo's time. What's happening today must be known by posterity.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost out of time, but again, we'll come back another time and revisit Magna Gas. And I want to thank you. I can't thank you enough for giving us this insight into neutron structure. And thanks again. And again, the website is neutronstructure.org. And I've been speaking with Dr. Ruggero Santilli.
That's really nice of you. It's the other way around. I appreciate, and I think you are doing a real service to society without any expectation that your listener will agree with my view. No, this is America. Everybody has his own idea, but at least they are informed of some alternative view, which is important, very important for the process. I wish CNN will do the same. Thank you.
Thanks.